BVC in Action, or Barrett Work in Action, is a series of webinars that we are providing you to share learnings and stories about cultural transformation by practitioners who are using Barrett models and tools. The intention is really to get more of, more knowledge, more inspirations, ideas, perspectives on how we have taken on the work to help our clients transform and become more of who they are. The whole session will be, as normal, be recorded and be available on Barrett's YouTube channel, but it will also be sent back to everyone who has recorded as a participant on this seminar. And we have close to 400 people who have registered, but I guess some of you are listening to this afterward, and some are going to be here on this live. That means that it's going to be difficult for us to have everyone on camera and everyone on sound. So Phil and I are here to facilitate and support that journey in the background. We will go off camera when Paul starts his presentation, and we will be checking the chat box, and we will checking the Q&A box. The whole session will be about 40 minutes to start with, something like that, plus or minus, where Paul share his story. Please write in your questions in the Q&A box as he speaks. And then at the end, the last 20 minutes, something like that, 15, 20 minutes, we will have a Q&A session where we read out the questions that has come in, so that Paul have a possibility to share that view. The slides that Paul is showing will be also available in PDF format afterwards, so that you don't have to, you can really be fully concentrated on the subject. That's the whole intention. We would like you to be clear that if you have, use the chat box for comments and feedback maybe, and then the Q&A box for the questions, so it makes it more clear for us to know where to go afterwards. So, is there anything more from the practical point of view, Phil, that I have missed that you would like to add?
You've been wonderfully practical.
Well, yeah, okay, exactly, wonderful. So, with that said, we would like to introduce Paul van der Grit from Zimbel in the Netherlands. That's where you are placed. You work globally. You have an extensive and long, deep experience of cultural transformation and leadership transformation, which both Phil and I are very impressed about how you deal with the world, so to speak, in this aspect. And we are really knowing that you have a very good story to tell here. And so we're proud and happy and excited to listen to that story, which is really about how you have helped an organization who had a cultural challenge and turned that into more purpose-driven collaboration, being able to deliver better to the needs of their clients, so to speak. So with that said, Paul, happy to have you here. And
I want to add one thing. I want to add one thing, which is that I met Paul maybe more than 10 years ago, but it was a series of courses we were taking with Gita Bellin. And Paul and I weren't just classmates; we were also roommates as well. And I fell in love with Paul, and I'm in love with Tor as well. So that's easy. But Paul is a very dear friend, and I'm so happy that you're here to tell this story today.
Thank you, Phil. You're spoiling me.
So with that, Paul, you can share your screen, and then Phil and I will go in the background, and we will only appear if there is something that is in a comment that we think you need to know in order to make the presentation better. Otherwise, we will be away, and we will give you a short warning when you have 5 minutes or something like that that left, so that you know that it's time to close up. Good.
All right. Well,
with that said,
just maybe before I start, thanks for the introduction, and you're always, it's not just in this session, but you're always spoiling me with compliments and appreciation, and I always feel a bit humbled by that. But one memory, Phil, was that we actually had dinner here in my backyard with my partner Reinout. That's a really warm memory that I cherish. So thanks for having me here. And
all right.
I'm also looking at the list. There's so many familiar people. So I would like to say hi to them all, but that's a bit too much. But very grateful.
We're 134.
You kind of just did by recognizing that they're here, so that's okay.
Well, one person to mention specifically that the story that I'm going to share, I did that together with a colleague, Karin Oeseberg, and she's actually joining too. So that's also great. Welcome, Karin.
Welcome, Karin. Yeah.
All right, we'll see you in a bit.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Let's see if I can share my screen. And this should work. So the story today is, I'll start with one thing. The story today is my personal impression. And so any other person that has been through the same experience going through it may have a different story. Nevertheless, I'll share my experience. I'll share the important moments. Feel free to comment or ask questions about anything. And then we'll hopefully have an interesting 40 minutes. First, next slide, a little bit about me, so that you know a little bit more about the consciousness that is appearing in front of you. This is a collage of things that are playing an important role in my life. Of course, on the left top, my family. My son's 20, my daughter is 18, and my wife is standing next to her. And my son, a couple of years ago, beat his first goal in life, which is to beat my length. So he's actually taller than me, and now he's trying to get also stronger, and he's almost there. Other things that are here, there's of course a big picture of this stadium, where one of my hobbies is to organize and produce live streamings of these sports events. This event that you're seeing is a korfball match that has I think there's about 15,000 people watching. And we're streaming this live with about 40 volunteers. And just one thing to note about this sport, it's not very famous in the rest of the world, but it's actually boys and girls together in one team. And so for that reason, I'm a big fan of this sport. It's one way of shifting towards more equality. Other things is there's a quantum physics picture. There's a lot of other stuff. Maybe one story to share that I shared also when we were preparing this morning with Phil and Thor, that the little bird, which Thor taught me that is not a swallow, but it's a kind of swallow. And it actually has two short legs to rest on the floor. So this bird was very young and very tired, actually exhausted. And the hand that you're seeing is my hand. It stayed there for about 15 minutes until it was rested, and then it took off in the air again. So that was one of the very special experience, I must say. Other things here, sports, any sports that you can hit a ball with something. It's showing golf and padel, but also like squash, badminton, those things. And on the right bottom, there's my other family, which is Reinoud Slot, my business partner. And together we own a company called Zimbel, for which we do this work, and a little bit more about Zimbel in a second. I also owe a big thank you and have a lot of gratitude for Gita Bellin, who over the last 10 years has taught us quite a lot. And the program that I'm going to share today, the story is, wouldn't have been possible this way without her. Let's put it like that. And still very fond of her. I think that's enough about it. On the right top, maybe. I have together with Reinoud also a passion for languages. So I'm learning how to speak French at the moment, which is quite hard, but it's also a lot of fun. I think that's enough about this slide about me. Feel free to ask questions there too. Next one. So about Zimbel, Zimbel's purpose was on the first slide, which is to turn cultural challenges into purpose-driven collaboration. And actually it should be cultural and leadership challenges. And the reason is that what we feel at the moment is that the purpose of organizations is changing. It's not just performance anymore. It's not just results in financial terms. It's way more than that. It's more the impact that we have on the planet and on the well-being of people in general. And there's a lot to do about congruence between what is it that we are trying to achieve in the world, and then back inside, what is it that our employees are experiencing. And for example, this little ladder, I won't explain it, but I'll share a couple of stories. One is that I've been working for an energy company, and employees in this company are actually leaving because they feel they're not making enough of a difference. And at the same time, this company is making huge steps into creating sustainable heat for housing. And somehow, the way this organization is run is not very congruent with what they're trying to achieve. Similar with Thor and Phil, we are working for a large humanitarian organization at the moment, and they are both relieving humanity from suffering, also at the same time, so beyond this, looking for ways how to improve well-being on this planet for humanity. And at the same time, looking inside of this organization, there's loads of stress. And a lot of people are struggling with burnout. And so somehow, this is not congruent. And the way we organize these companies is not very congruent. So that is basically why we've created Zimbal. And as a very practical thing, what we deliver is programs that focus on cultural transformation, leadership development, team coaching, all these things in international, multinational companies. And we've been doing that for the last, give or take, 20 years. Then towards today. So we're talking today about the story of a pharmaceutical company. And I am extremely grateful that I'm allowed to share this story today. And also to be in integrity with the people in this organization. I'm not going to mention anything that could reveal their name. I can't answer questions in that direction. And I can also not mention or reveal anything that talks about the types of vaccines they produce. I wish to stay in integrity, so please don't ask questions that in that direction. Also don't mention these things in Q&A and in the chats. The purpose of today is also not that. The purpose is the remarkable journey that this team has made over the last 3 years. Now, the company is a pharmaceutical company. They produce vaccines up to stage 3 clinical trials. So that means material that is ready to be tested on humans. And no doubt a lot of you have heard a lot of this over the last year. So we all became a little bit of amateur experts in this area. So then a little bit about how we design these programs. And this is general for all the things that we do, but also specific in this situation. We always talk about integral design. So leadership, teamwork, and culture. And at the same time, relating it to a business situation. There may be things happening in the context of this company where priorities shift, where business choices have to be made. And we always integrate that into our programs. We can't leave out a certain part like efficiency, or if a market changes, that we leave that out of the program. We always have to look at it from a holistic perspective. It's also something that we can't design it out completely at the beginning. It's a journey, and a lot of people in our clients hate that word, but you have to work with whatever is coming up. So if we, for example, do a values assessment and we have planned something after that, but if the results of the values assessment point us in a different direction, we need to take that. Of course, with the tools of the Value Center, we make culture measurable and we make it concrete and more tangible, although it's still a very intangible subject. There's no physics instrument that can measure trust, as far as I know. And of course, we're using a lot of different technologies to facilitate this journey in a better way. Then towards the beginning of this program. So we have to go back before COVID, long before COVID. 2018, the leader of this production department called us and said, listen, we have a problem. We have some serious quality issues. And at the same time, we, as a team, are not very aligned about it. We are struggling, we are not getting to the causes, and we seem not to be able to solve this in a good way. And when preparing this story, Thor asked me to emphasize a little bit on what were the reasons why this person reached out. And one of the reasons, one of the motivations was that this leader realized that she could not do it by herself, and that the team needed some outside influence to help them get on the right track. We knew these people before, they knew us, so we had some shared experience, and they knew that it was safe to ask us the question without the risk of being judged. It also felt safe for this team to invite us into their team. And above all, what we found was that they had the absolute commitment to make it work for the department and for the purpose that they were living. And at the same time, they had a very strong openness to look in the mirror themselves. But they just didn't know yet that their mirror, so to say, was a bit blurred. So then this is what that looks like in terms of values surveys. Now, I would assume most of you are familiar with these types of surveys. But for those who are not, maybe very short in the middle is a representation of the current culture. Now, these dots correspond to certain values and behaviors. I left these out. The white dots are considered to be potentially limiting. And examples of these are blame, confusion, control, and short-term focus. The amount of these dots represents the number of votes that people issued on limiting values. And in this situation, in this team, the number of these votes is 30%. And this is called, in cultural terms, it's called cultural entropy. And that is defined, I think Richard has defined that quite nicely as the amount of energy that a person loses when they start working in this culture on things they do not consider to be productive. So things like blame and confusion, and sometimes bureaucracy, silos, other things. And 30% is not a very healthy culture. It's a culture that faces quite serious issues. So it's very, so to say, congruent with the story I just shared. And just to go back to this one, the face is on the right. This is a bit what 30% entropy looks like. At the same time, their desired culture is way more into levels 3, 4, and 5. So efficiency, performance on level 3, growth, transformation, evolution on level 4, and internal cohesion, alignment, and things what give us meaning on level 5. And you can see the shift from the lower levels, which is really focusing on self-interest, to the higher levels on levels 4 and 5, which is more in service to the common interest or shared goals. Now, this is all very easily said. And the question then comes up, what to do? So a couple of things here. One is that in the let's go back. In the middle column, people don't really feel that they are shaping their culture. It's more that it's happening to them. And for the causes of this culture, they experience that as being outside of them. So what we did was a series of individual conversations, and I think it was a 2-day workshop back then, in which basically what it says here, we gave them the tools to transform the quality of their lives. But to give that more meaning, in that workshop, we strongly focused on going from blame to accountability, going from judgment to curiosity, or to understanding, a desire to understand, and going from KPIs and process parameters more towards heartfelt goals. And that is also easily said. However, imagine that, I can share an example here. My son's now 20. When he was almost 18, we had this agreement that we would pay for his driver's license if he wouldn't drink until his age 18. And that's something that he wanted himself to. And at 17 and a half, and one day I came home from work, and my wife looked at me and said, "Your son wants to tell you something." And so I went up the stairs to change, and he came to me and he said, "Listen, I have to tell you something. I've already drunk alcohol." And this still brings up a bit of emotion, but so he told me that. And then a little bit after that, we talked about it. And then he asked me, "What do you want to do with our agreement about paying for the driver's license?" And then I asked him to think about what he would like to do with that. And I told him, I'll do the same. So we came back 2 days later, and he said, "I'll pay for half because I've not respected our agreement." And my response then was, I was really touched by that he would want to do that. And I said, "Listen, that's all right. I'll take that because you've not kept up our agreement, but I'll give it back because you told me." And for me, the lesson there was that this level of openness and this level of vulnerability, I could never judge that. I could never judge that. But the same, the level of difficulty for me in the beginning, when he said I've drank alcohol, I felt judgments come up and questions why and all these responses. But so it's easily said from blame to accountability or from judgment to curiosity. But imagine yourself shifting in a moment like that. And then back to this situation. Imagine that someone in your team comes to you and says, "Listen, we've messed up this sample." And feel the courage and the level of self-control that you need in order to then ask a question, instead of going with a big sigh and saying, again, why? Can't you do it? All these judgments coming up then. So it requires, it's easily said, but it requires a lot of discipline, a lot of reflection to actually make that shift. And that is what happened in that workshop. I remember one person having enormous insights into the area of, when I keep judging or blaming, I keep this distance between me or us and and the people that work with us, and we'll never work together on solving these problems. This workshop was really a turnaround in the whole in this whole journey. In a timeline that looks like this. So this was the beginning. And it was really a values assessment, individual conversations, a 2-day workshop, and some individual coaching afterwards. Not very much more. Then maybe a little step in between. If we look at the right thing, the shift that's happening from a more theoretical perspective is from the lower part below this line and the upper part. And when we are blaming and judging and maybe creating silos because my colleague is not performing the way he should, or his team, or my boss, or them, this creates an unhealthy culture where people focus on serving their individual needs. They're trying to stay safe. They're trying not to be blamed. And that way, people keep experiencing things happening to them instead of shaping or being in control. Again, then blaming circumstances, blaming others, and so reinforcing this vicious circle. When people find their role in this whole thing and what I just described, not blame or judge, but more ask questions. Why is this happening? What did I do to contribute to that event? Then you get more into this upper circle where I discover what I've done. I discover my role. I'm looking in the mirror. Someone may give me feedback, and I can then change things. If I don't know what I've done, I can't change it. But if I know what I've done, then I end up with a whole situation, a whole description of how things happened with my part in it, and then I can change it. And this all connects to very recent psychological research by Dacey and Ryan in a book called The Self-Determination Theory, which relates to these left 3 basic human psychological needs. I won't go into depth here, but I found that very fascinating to discover. So then, 1 year ahead on the journey, 2019, second values assessment. And a lot happened here. Now, these are 2. The upper one is the values survey of the same group, where they shifted from the 30% entropy that you saw before and the 5 white dots in the current culture towards no dots showing up. But let's see, I have it here. 8% left in 1 year. So this team created a completely healthy situation in their current culture. And not only that, there's also things showing up, appearing in the current culture, like coaching and mentoring, like customer satisfaction, which is really outside of their own team, like leadership development. And there's also, which is also an important indicator, there's 5 matches between the current culture and the desired culture. So this team, this culture is really one that's on the right track that just needs a bit of tweaking. So things that show up here in the desired culture are initiative, excellence, leading by example, but keeping the things that are already strong. The second value survey that you see here is one that includes the seniors in this department. So about 20 people that basically should run the operations. They are experts, they know everything, and they can lead the operators in this organization. And this team has 2 white dots and 7 positive ones, and this is about 14% entropy. So we can already see that the healthy culture on top creates a bit more space below. Here again, we organized a follow-up session with these seniors, and here's something that didn't go. Well, it didn't go bad. It wasn't negative, but it was also not as good as we intended. So we organized this workshop with all these seniors, and although after this workshop they got together more, they talked more about the things that kept them busy, but they also gave feedback at the level of, we felt that the workshop was not concrete enough, was not tangible. We have difficulty translating it into our day-to-day work. So we kind of missed the boat a little bit there. Fortunately, they gave us that feedback, and we kept working together. And so covered that already. The year after, we translated this feedback into very specific personal development sessions with topics like embracing empathy, like overcoming the need to be right, developing a growth mindset, becoming comfortable with conflicts, all these things. Now also, and that made it for them more tangible, and that some topics were people appreciated that very much and wanted more of that, and some topics a once-off session was enough. And the one topic that was overall requested to have more deepening sessions was discovering more about how judgment works and what the effect is. So that's something that we will explore more. Now, as you all know, 2020 was also the year of COVID, and so operations changed. People had to work from home, were confronted with homeschooling, created very difficult working circumstances. And what in the beginning of 2020, this production leader called me and said, listen, if we don't do anything, then we will probably lose half of our staff in burnouts and other stress-related issues. So we need to do something. Can you help? And this is a summary of the things that we did. Basic stress management. So sometimes just talking about with people at home about their home situation, about how can I work together, keep working at the level I would like to and still do homeschooling. Sometimes there was some individual coaching where in the middle of this whole stressful period, someone was also buying a house and had difficulty with dealing with all these high stress topics. In some situations, there was a team that was not functioning too well. So there was some accelerated team development, some more intensive guidance there. And as I mentioned already, this personal leadership development was continued at the end of 2020 with these very specific topics around personal development. And one thing there was that at the end of a production campaign for an important vaccine, we sat down with one of the production teams, and we did a so-called check-in. And this was a very extensive check-in. So basically, with all the operators, we spent a whole morning just asking them, where were you 10 months ago? How have you experienced the last 10 months? Where are you now? And people came in with an expectation on how on earth are we going to spend 4 hours just talking to each other. And in their experience, the session only lasted for half an hour. So 4 hours later, people were checked in again. They were very happy that they had basically came up for air to breathe. That's what one person said how he felt. And here again, we conducted a value survey. I'll go back to that in a bit. And this was the result of a production team, which for me is quite remarkable, because usually production teams have, or especially in high stressful situations, teams have quite some entropy. In this team, after this production campaign of about half a year, 12.5% entropy, which did not show up in their current culture. So it was quite diverse, the selections that they made. And they were also quite happy with how their culture developed. And for me, one thing that struck me here was that these people, a lot of them were hired. So this team had grown, I think it had doubled in size, or maybe even almost tripled. And so there were a lot of people from outside, but they all came in with one shared goal, is to get this campaign finished and to get these batches produced. And at the end, they were, although tired, they were quite fulfilled with their achievements. And they were, how do you say, they were looking out positively towards the future. It's not that they had big changes. They missed, we can see here on level 2, a little dot. They had missed a bit of the personal contact because of the regulations, but also because of the pressure. And they were happy to check in with each other again. So to go back here, I mentioned these leadership development workshops about empathy and all these things. And at the end of last year, or somewhere in the fall, we had the opportunity to meet in person. There was a little gap where that was allowed. And we talked about what is the next step for this team and this department. And again, one of the striking things here was that although in the midst of this very high pressure campaign of producing these vaccines, their next step, what they identified, was to take more ownership for the purpose of this whole organization and not just theirs. And they thought about how can we create better collaboration between our departments and not just inside of their department. So they freed up their attention from their operation towards the more whole organization purposes. So then this year, continuing this journey, and we're now, what's happening at the moment is that this team is now working together and delivering people to a, how do you say, subsidiary, to another part of the same company where they scale up production. So they are actually exporting talent, experience, and knowledge to help others start up whilst continuing their own production. Also, about a month ago, I spoke to this production leader, and she said, although we are in the midst of a very extremely busy period, I personally don't have much to do in that operation. I can look bigger than just my operation. I can look at what are we going to do after this campaign. So what's our long-term goal? What other vaccines do we need, are on the horizon, and do we need to produce? What's the next? And what's our long-term purpose? And then how does that translate into strategic goals? And this is something that we are looking at the moment. We're also continuing these leadership development workshops into more deepening topics like judgment, what I mentioned earlier. And we are looking for other areas where support is requested. So basically these things. It's taking more ownership for the company purpose, continued leadership development, and then long-term goals and portfolio management. So beyond this last campaign, it's more about what's coming next and where do we need to improve. I think that basically concludes my story. I have no idea where I am on time, Phil.
You are completely perfect on time. We've got just about 20 minutes left for people to ask questions, and I'm seeing a few questions showing up in the chat box. And if you want them to ask, we're going to moderate those from the Q&A area. But there's more questions coming in.
All right,
Paul. Before we start any of that, I want to know about you, right? Because you've been deeply in this, and I mean, what struck me was the stories you told of, particularly moments where people were trying to do their jobs and homeschool, or do their jobs and buy a house, and the stresses of all of that. So it felt like a completely human process. But tell me about you in this. How's the impact on you been?
Yeah, you can put the last slide up as well.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But it has been also part of me in my growth. So, and it's how do I say that? It's quite difficult. It's like meeting with friends, spending time with them, learning, and it's not like I'm a consultant working for them as a pharmaceutical company. It's me working with them. I can't mention names, but I would mention that it's me and Karin, who's also on the call, working with them together. And one example also is that we had offered everyone in that organization the opportunity to call if they had any question, any topic, any situation where that was hard to handle for them. And they would just call me and say, listen, this is what I'm facing. I'm buying a house and my stress is going through the roof. Can you help me? So we did that. So it's just people working together without any boundaries or any definitions or any limitations.
Thank you.
That's
wonderful.
Does that answer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Should we jump in with the questions, Tor?
Yeah, we have 14 questions right now, and you can continue until the end. We will try to answer as many, reflect upon as many questions as possible, but our experience is that we won't be able to cover all. Just so you know, all questions that being posted will be addressed afterwards by Paul as well. And the answers to those questions will be posted along with the PDF of all the slides as well. So you will be able to capture that as well. So we are just keeping as many questions or addressing as many questions we can. And I don't know if you would like to start, Phil, by picking one of those.
I'll start. I can start somewhere in the middle from Life. How did you mobilize the leaders to open up and actively promote the transformation?
And who was this?
This is Life, I think, in Poland. Life Christensen.
Well, a couple of them knew us already, so they knew what was coming. But basically, it is, at one hand, they're trying to achieve something, and so that they had the ambition of drastically improving quality in this situation, and mobilizing them means showing them how they have created the situation that they're in by asking questions, by sharing perspectives until they see where they are and how they have created it. That is something that mobilizes someone into, okay, if I can see how I have created or what my part is in this, I also know what to change. That's a mobilizing act. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not in the old, in, let's say, for me, in the expression of mobilizing is something like, yes, you can do it, you have to do it, let's go on this journey. It's not like that. It's discovering what is it that's driving us. In this particular situation, it was mastery. We are bound by mastery in making life-changing vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we're here. And tapping into that ambition, aspiration is mobilizing. It's a mobilizing act.
Thank you.
You will see that there are quite a few questions around the purpose and how you worked and delivered on that. So we'll come back to that. Take some other characteristic of questions there are. One which is very from Phil Badley. How have you had to adapt your approach because of the remote working due to the pandemic?
Well, I was used to, and Karen and I were used to just going there. We were allowed to go there, and we had offsites in physical spaces together. And so after the 15th of March last year, our approach went totally virtual. Or about 98%. There's one or two occasions where I went to walk in a forest with someone because we really needed physical presence, but all the rest was done virtually. And so that required us to be very specific in this is what this next intervention, this next action is going to be about. More alignment between us and the leaders there. And more small interventions, I would say. More individual conversations. And just bringing the essence back to a group. But sometimes also just this check-in I mentioned was just like a morning tea, and just everyone sitting back, relaxing in their chairs. Some of them were in the office because a lot of them had to work inside of the laboratories, in the clean rooms, but a lot of them were at home too. Thank God for technology.
Yeah, just imagine if this would have happened 10 years ago, we wouldn't have been ready at all to do what we do today. Not. Okay, Phil.
I'm going to go back to purpose because there are a lot of questions around that, and we'll address those as we go through. But Clive Wilson, I'm going to combine two together, one from Clive and one from Peter Paul in the Netherlands. So Clive is asking about what he noticed was the lack of S values, the societal values in the results. And therefore relating that to a sense of was there a feeling that this is really societal work that's going on here, and also from Peter Paul asking about have you been able to connect to formulate around their purpose in the work.
Well, my first guess would be that people work here to get rid of diseases in the world. That's why they come. And so that's so transparent, they don't even mention it. So they focus a lot on how are we going to get rid of these diseases? What do we need to do to get rid of that? And they don't always mention the actual deep why. I think it's in that area somewhere. We have a similar experience now working for another organization, a humanitarian organization where making a difference does not show up, but that's the reason why people are there.
Yeah,
it's completely
baked in.
It's it's obvious. It's
yeah.
Here's another.
That would be my first guess.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Did you want to add anything there, Paul? do that? Okay. A completely different type of question, which is interesting here from Pilar, and it's all the manager and the middle managers team are still on board, or has some bosses had to leave the company because of their lack of alignment with the cultural transformation?
There is one person that has left, and there's a new person that came in.
So mainly it's the same.
Mainly it's the same. At the lower levels, a lot of people came in because this team had to double in size. And at senior level, 1 or 2 people left. Some because they were ready for a new challenge. And also there were some people who really turned around 180 degree in the middle of this challenge. So this accelerated team development part that I talked about was really about that. How can we overcome our internal team struggle and just focus on our common good?
I mean, it's really a bonding exercise where you come together and you become stronger as a team rather than that you would like to leave it. So I would assume it's the other reason.
Absolutely, and at the same time, it is creating a level of leaders. If I compare to 3 years ago, there are now leaders ready for a bigger challenge. Absolutely, I'm very impressed with their growth. What they have created in these 3 years is amazing.
Good. I think we have space for a couple more questions.
I'm going to keep going. So Andreas says, it sounds like you have a higher level of trust established between you and the client. How did you achieve that?
Well, as I said, I knew this person for longer, but the real level of trust here is with this leader is created in this program is through total openness as a person. It's not that I am a consultant and this person is a production leader. I am me and she is her, and we are connecting at that level. We're not leaving anything out. Combined with a very sincere attempt not to judge anything, but still tap into. Her ambition was so high, and tapping into that, and then giving back everything that I felt was relevant without any judgment. I think that's at least an attempt not to be judgmental. I think that creates a lot of trust.
One of the things that I've seen with this work is that the consultants that really create that level of trust and are not just experts in what they do, but they're also focused continually on their own inner development and own inner process. Tell me something about your practices and your process for preparing you. And that you're willing to share.
Yeah.
I can talk about the first time we met, Phil.
Careful.
No, for me, it has to be inside out and outside in congruent. As the symbol ladder shows, I can't pretend to be non-judgmental. So, and for me, that's the hardest thing that I can aim for, achieve, intend to be. So I spent, I don't know, there were years that I've spent like 60 or 70 days in courses, and not 1 year, but maybe 10 years in a row. Getting rid of fear, of judgments, of identities, of definitions, and having not always, but having a lot of fun doing so. And it's never finished. I'll sign up for the next tomorrow if I can. There's always a lot more to discover. So And it is, for me, it is two-sided. I can build skill in learning a language. But if the inner part is not following or leading, if you wish, then I'll create some pretense of myself. So yeah, and practices, I meditate a lot, I do some advanced practices. I balance physical exercise with sitting behind a screen like this, which is quite dulling sometimes if you do only that. Yeah.
Troy, do you have one last question?
Yeah, I think that we have time for that. I just saw that something came in here. There's a... Yeah, this is partly, I don't know if Cesar, who came in with the question, there is often fear of becoming vulnerable for leaders who hold authority over others, so to speak. How do you help leaders embrace humility as they connect with others? And that's really part of the exercises that you have, the workshops that you have done has been focusing on that, I assume.
Absolutely.
And what would you say is the a shorter answer to answer that question, because it is quite a multidimensional question.
Absolutely, it's a life journey.
Mm.
For me, it starts with inviting everyone into the room as a person, and not a job title. So we always start with personal things. Tell me about your history. Where did you grow up? What happened? What's your family like? Just to get someone outside of their job title and just be himself. And when people experience that it's not only fully okay to be themselves, but it's also appreciated and welcomed, and it's creating this open atmosphere where it's okay just to be you, and where just being you is the it's not just being you, right? It's the best of me showing. And if that's welcomed, not judged, it's kept safe, it's even built on, then we can start talk about what does that fear, where does that fear come from? What is it that you're actually afraid of? Is it judgment? Is it being rejected? Is it being not good enough? What is it? And then we can look at where did that come from and how can we deal with that, together with some very inner work practices that over time resolve that fear.
Lovely. I look at time, and we are really also concerned to be able to finish on time. Thank you so much, Paul, for that lovely journey description of what you. I know it's not supposed to be called a journey, but it is. We are very happy to say that we now have this also recorded, and we will then place that.
Wonderful.
So that you who have not been able to be here on time or in time, so to speak, you are able to listen to this afterward. And also the slides. And we have a lot in the chat that you can read. There's a lot of appreciation and love and thank you to you, Paul, for a wonderful presentation. Anything you would like to add, Phil?
No, just to say thank you again. Thank you to everybody who showed up. Thank you to Paul. Thank you to the client who allowed this story to be told, because when we can share these stories, it inspires others to start their own journeys and make the world a better place. So thank you to everybody.
And we will come back regarding the unanswered question. We have the 30 questions recorded, and Paul will look at those.
Some homework.
Some of that will be answered in writing as well.
I will.
Okay.
I will.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Blessings, everyone.
Thank you.